Hey guys, Seven with Shawn, and just want to recap the sermon this week. We talked about what theologians call the problem of evil. And the problem of evil is basically the question of how can a good, just, and loving God allow evil and suffering to happen in the world if there's evil and suffering in the world, which there is, it's obvious, then God must not be good or just, or he must not exist at all. So we tackled that question. We had 4 points to it really, and we used the story of Joseph to really hinge from in the scriptures, because in the story of Joseph, after he's been beaten, sold into slavery, accused of rape, thrown in jail, he rises high to power in Egypt and becomes number two in power in Egypt. His brothers come down. He forgives his brothers. Um, when his father dies, his brothers are worried he's gonna exact revenge on him, and they come to him and he says, "What am I in the place of God?" He says, "What you intended for evil, God intended for good." And the whole premise is that yes, evil and suffering do happen in this world. Bad things do happen. We live in a fallen world. But from that evil and suffering, and it never takes it away. Like, it's always going to hurt. It's always going to be there. But God can take that, recycle it, and use it to do great things, that you can be a wounded healer, that you can bring comfort and goodness and all of that to this world. So that was the premise of it. The first point, we talked about the logical answer to the problem of evil. There's a lot of logical answers, and philosophers and theologians have written about them over the years. This isn't like a new question. Some people think it is, that Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, the kind of the new atheists, brought it up and thought of it, but they didn't. It's been an age-old question. It's been answered in every generation, and then a new batch of atheists ask it again. C.S. Lewis, one of the ways he answered it was the free will argument, is that on this planet you've given people the ability to do good people and people that do evil, and they can sometimes interact, and sometimes the evil people do good, and sometimes the good people do evil, and because of our free choice, it has given the possibility of evil and suffering to happen. But if it were not for free choice, you would not have love. You can't have love unless you choose to do it. And the good and the love that is in humans' free choice outweighs that. Outweighs the evil and suffering is in this world, especially when the overall plan is that God is coming back to redeem and undo all evil and suffering in this world. So that was the logical problem, or logical answer, but it creates an emotional problem, because here's the deal: when you're going through suffering, there's no there's no there's no book, there's no answer, none of that is going to suffice. And many times when someone is going through suffering, our job is to just suffer with them, to sit with them, and do that. And the best answer to the problem of evil is not written in a book. It's written on wood. It's written on the cross. And here's the thing. A lot of people will say, yeah, well, the Joseph story is great. For every Joseph story, there's 100 random just evil and suffering stories where there was no redemption, and God's still on the hook for the problem of evil. And here's what I would tell you is point three is the suffering God. The truth of the matter is, because of Jesus, God put himself on the hook. He put Christ on the hook for evil and suffering. And there's no other philosophy, there's no other religion where God came and suffered for us, in place of us, in our stead. And it's because of point three. It's a spiritual problem that we have, is that we're separated from God. So I talked about our separation from God, how we're made in God's image, but we're also broken. It's a marred image. And Christ is going to return and complete that in us and make us who we were meant to be. And that's part of our Christian walk. So the last point four, was the suffering God. And I just said it, that there's no other faith system, there's no other philosophy, there's no other thought where God would enter into our suffering to undo our suffering. And I told the story of my father, who was a Marine, and I was getting a spinal tap as a little boy, and I was fighting it, and he came in. I thought he came in to save me and get the doctors and nurses away from me, and he proceeded to pick me up, scoop me up in his arms. I felt so safe, and then he lifted my shirt and turned my back toward the doctors, and in that moment, I felt betrayal, and I felt betrayed, and I thought he was doing evil to me, but really what he was doing was to save my life because the doctors thought I had spinal meningitis. And God is that way. And sometimes perspective is everything. Is just because we can't see meaning in evil and suffering doesn't mean there's not meaning in it, and we won't one day see it. So anyways, guys, enjoy the study. Go be the best.